All right, it's your guy, Robert Manni, coming to you from Joshua Tree National Park here in Southern California, announcing a brand new Guys Radio this Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Pacific time on KCAA Radio in sunny Southern California. 102.3, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Hey, you know, on Guys Radio, we've done shows about sex. We've done shows about the Supreme Court. Well, tonight we're going to do one about the secret space program. If you haven't heard about it, Tony Rodrigues survived the 20 and back. What is a 20 and back? You'll find out if you listen tonight on Guys Radio. If you can't catch us live, we're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, Blog Talk Radio. We're there for you. Guys Radio, your host, Robert Manni. I hope you can join us. Thanks for your support.
It's Guy Radio. Here's your host, Robert Manni.
All right, welcome to Guys Radio. This is your host, Robert Manni, welcoming you to the show. We've got a great one for you today. Guys Radio, the place where men and women can be at their best so everyone wins. We bring you the information that you may be interested in to make the best of your life, and then you determine if it's right for you. You know, on Guys Radio, we have talked about sex. We have talked about the Supreme Court, and this evening we're going to talk about the secret space program. According to our special guest, who will be out shortly, Tony Rodrigues, there is a Black Ops ongoing secret space program. You may have heard about it over the internet. You may have heard about it on Gaia, but it's been talked about. It's part of what Tony claims is a slow-moving disclosure to the people on our planet about the existence of extraterrestrials and the secret space program that's taking place in the United States, all over the world, on the moon, on Mars, on Ceres, which is a planet-like object surrounding Mars, and all over the multiverse, if you will. According to Tony, there are all different types of beings, not tens, not hundreds, not thousands, but billions of different types of life forms that we're going to learn about in the next decade or so, slowly but surely, a little bit more information. Today, I just saw an article. There's always some type of article kind of that's buried in the newspapers or online, and it's a way of doing disclosure. And this one was about that we're going to be going to Mars by 2035. So there are already plans to get off of Earth, get that space program back in action. But according to our guest, Tony Rodrigues, he did what's called a 20 and back. And we're going to get into that. A 20 and back is basically a program where you are enlisted into it, if you will, at a young age for a specific reason. Some for leadership capabilities, some are empaths, and others are just put into the program to be worked as worker bees, if you will, like Tony was. And you spend 20 years of your time being trained and then doing tasks, and then you are returned to where you were before after a series of what would be called mind wipes. So according to Tony, who's going to be out shortly, he did his 20 and back. He says that his consciousness was removed from the body that was being used for the 20 years, came back to his 20-year younger body. His mind was wiped, so he wouldn't remember everything. But he had put the intention in place to remember everything that was going on. So we're going to have a very interesting part one of an extended conversation about the secret space program with Tony Rodrigues. And again, this isn't information that's not readily available. I'm not breaking any news here. It's out there. People are talking about it. And the discussion is good. And you might hear it all, everything Tony has to say, and you might say, I don't believe it. Or you might say, wow, I want to learn more. So that's up to you. And Guys Radio, we bring you information on relationships, on diet, wellness, fitness, spirituality. We did a show recently on the Supreme Court, and now we're doing one of two on the secret space program. We're going to devote the entire show to my discussion with Tony Rodrigues. I think you're really going to like it. So Guys Radio, what's happening in my world? Well, as I mentioned many times, I was making the move from New York City to sunny Southern California, and I'm finally here. I'm adjusting to it. I'm going to do a half hour on my adjustment, if you will, and my family's adjustment, and all of the things that I've noticed and observed, differences between New York and Southern California, specifically the San Diego area, which is very interesting to me. It's kind of, I say this in a complimentary way. It's kind of like an 80s city, if you will. It seems back to kind of a happier time, kind of the pace is not crazy like New York. It's not as intense. People say things to each other like, have a great rest of your day. How's your day going? What are you up to? Whereas in New York, you don't ask people that kind of stuff unless you know them. You don't say, how's your day going so far? You just say, you grunt, or you say hello, maybe, but probably not. It's just a different vibe. And I'm not trashing New York because I lived there for 30 years, and it's a great place. It's probably the greatest city in the world, but it's a whole different experience, and you have to be ready for it. And over time, it can beat you up, but it'll take you to your highest highs and maybe your lowest lows like it did me. But overall, it can be a great experience. And San Diego is a much simpler place. It's nice. The weather is ridiculous. That's what I call it, ridiculous, because every day it's like 80s and sunny, like every day so far that I've been here, which is about 6 weeks or so. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the fact that the pace is more relaxing. I'm getting a lot of work done regardless, without the frenzy and chaos of New York. And I like the people, and I love the weather. And there's a lot of different things to do. This past weekend, my family and I, we went out to Joshua Tree. Joshua Tree is what they call a semi-desert. It's a couple of hours away from downtown San Diego, and it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And the Joshua Tree are a set of trees that are out in what's called the semi-desert. You know, I always thought I hadn't spent real time in the desert. Yes, I've been out to Las Vegas and stuff, but I haven't been to the Arabian deserts, if you will. So we went out there, and the environment is kind of it's dry. There's a lot of rocks. There's not a lot of cactus, if you will. There is some, but there's not a lot. But there's a lot of different types of vegetation and foliage that you really don't see anyplace else that I've ever been. I'm an East Coast guy, so it was interesting to me. It was a lot of fun, and it was a real eye-opener. And the thing that really got me was there is a permeance of silence that overrides the entire environment, and the quietude of it is super powerful. So anyhow, that was my recent trip. And then the next day we went to a place called Belmont Park. And Belmont Park is a kind of a little beach town. It reminds me of like a Seaside Heights in the San Diego area. And it's fun. It's like an amusement park by the beach. And again, there's so many beaches here in the San Diego area. If you don't like the beach, don't come to San Diego. If you like it, you found the right place. And I love the beach. I don't just hang out at the beach, but I love having it nearby and accessible. So anyhow, having a great time so far here in San Diego. We're going to bring out our special guest, as I mentioned, Tony Rodrigues. We're going to talk about the Secret Space Program. This is Robert Manni, your host on Guys Radio. Like I mentioned in my opening comments, we have a special guest, a special show today. We have somebody who was in what's called the Secret Space Program joining us on Guys Radio. And as we do on Guys Radio, we bring you information. We don't make determinations. We don't take sides as much as possible. And I just really want to get people's stories out there that may be of interest to you, and then you can factor in, hey, this is something that I need to know about, or this is something that's interesting, or hey, just not for me. So I've got somebody special here who was part of, again, the Secret Space Program. His name is Tony Rodrigues. Let me tell you a little bit about him. At the age of 10, he was recruited into some what's called quote-unquote kind of black programs, and Tony will explain to us what those are. And eventually he made his way into the Secret Space Program, where they basically send you off and you do what's called a 20 and back. So for 20 years you work for the program, and then you come back, and I believe you get a mind wipe, and then you get those 20 years back. Your years are regenerated, and so you de-age, if you will. He's been to the Mars colony and a place called Ceres, and he's worked on several trading spaceships and on interstellar missions. So I'm gonna leave this up to you, audience. You decide, hey, I believe this, I don't, whatever. I'm putting the information out here. Tony Rodrigues on the show. I saw Tony on Gaia, along with a lot of other folks on there, Corey Good, David Wilcock, and some other people, and I thought it was fascinating. I watched many shows, and I thought, hey, I'd love to talk to one of these folks, and sure enough, Tony and I got connected on social media, and here we are. So welcome to Guys Radio, Tony Rodrigues.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, again, my audience, I'm not sure how familiar they are with the secret space program or if they're going to believe everything or not, but let's get that information out there and start with the very basic, Tony. What is, in your estimation, the secret space program?
Well, it's hard to put it all in one nutshell, but basically for quite some time, at least 100 years, we have been in space and interacting with ET civilizations. And they've kept it a secret. The world has been kind of a petri dish for a long time, and ETs have been here for a long time. Many, not just one or two or five or a dozen separate civilizations interacting with us, but quite a few. And that's why when people research extraterrestrial contact and involvement with things that happen, with abduction experiences or people that just have encounters, when people research them, they are all it's a very varied experience. There's not a lot of common denominators. People and that's why, because there are many different programs interacting with us, and they each have many different levels of their own sophistication and technology. So okay, it's just a microcosm of what's going on up there.
All right. Well, so who, in your estimation, from your experience, is kind of behind the secret space program or programs? And is it a collective of different nations on Earth? Is it certain governments working with certain entities in other planets, other universes, or whatever? They're using portal technology, time travel, etc. What is it all about, and what is the objective of the program?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So since I went public, so what happened to me, just real quick.
Sure.
I was taken and did what was referred to as a 20 and back, or a term of service, however you want to word it, and put back and had my memories erased. And then I lived my life. And then I had an MRI. I had a few things happen to me in April of 2015, and in May of 15, I began to get the bulk of my memories back. Like whatever happened. That lowered the barrier, or whatever barrier there was for me to not have my memories. I started to get them back, and I went public. I started talking to researchers, and people contacted me. And so to get back to your question,
who's behind it all?
I've had a few thousand people contact me since then, and each with their own kind of experience with fragmented memories. And what I've been able to do is lump everything into three categories. Okay. What I found is that your typical contactee that has had their memory erased, they come into three categories. The one is a human-based program. So the United States has a couple separate programs. There's seems to be an international space program, secret space program. I've heard there's an Asian one, and then there are ET programs. So the three categories are human program. So that's any program that's ran by humans from Earth. And that seems to be the bulk of what happens in the United States. When you leave the country and talk to abductees in other countries, then they seem to have different programs in charge of what's going on with them. The second program would be an ET-based one. And there is what's known as the Draco Alliance, which is a reptilian race that seems to have dominance over our region of space. And typically when people have contact with the Draco program, it's a more negative experience. I believe that I was taken by a human program that was subject under the that had that was ran under the Draco authority of space program. And then the third category is everybody else. There seem to be many ET programs that come down here just for a short time. They may come down and take people for whatever reason they need, for labor or genetics or for whatever reason, scientific reason. They do a few things and then they leave. And I call that everybody else the visiting programs. And they could be from anywhere. They could be from anywhere in our galaxy or even extragalactic. Travel between galaxies isn't as difficult as we've been led to believe.
Okay. It seems like there's so much coming out now about extraterrestrials, UFOs. It's like it's part of everybody's normal conversation now, where before it was, my favorite Martian or something like, yeah, right. Now everybody seems to be, yeah, that it makes perfect sense that we're not the only ones out there. So do you think this is all by design, that there is a drip, drip, drip in terms of letting us know what's happening?
Absolutely. So, I don't have 100% firsthand knowledge of the current events of what happened. What happened to me was a long time ago. But knowing what I know, and after getting recall of how the programs work and the situation that was politically happening up there, my personal feeling is that at some point there was a reversal. I believe there was a war, or the leadership changed up there, or there was I believe there was a plan in place to just kill everybody or put us back to the Stone Ages, because we're beginning to get to a level of technology where somebody can make something in their garage that can discover the existence of the programs or discover the existence of extraterrestrials. Okay. We are starting to get to that level of technology where people can just make a certain type of telescope with a spectrometer, and find life. So I think the original plan by the humans that broke away, the breakaway groups, was just to have a disaster happen down here and put us back into the Stone Ages, and then things would carry on for another few thousand years, just how they've been. I think ETs intervened, and so that's not the plan anymore. They have to disclose to us, and now we're seeing the beginnings of a disclosure. What's interesting is that other whistleblowers, I don't want to, I always like to mention Randy Kramer, who for me has been given a lot of great information and has made a big difference to me. And he said that he's been in contact with his brigadier general from the Marine Corps Special Division, and which is basically the Marine Corps space program. And what they decided was to have an official disclosure at the end of a presidency. That way, the incoming president could have complete deniability, and the outgoing president could have deniability and not look soft. In other words, if they disclosed in the middle of a presidency, it would make the existing president look uninformed or soft. So right at the end of a presidency is the optimal time for the United States military to disclose. I find it, so if you connect some dots here, I'm going to connect some dots that originally we had the Apollo program, and we saw Kennedy was assassinated. That was his program that he designed, and he was assassinated. They went in. There are many people. William Tompkins has come forward and said that the Apollo program was assisted by ETs, and when they got there, the Draco didn't allow us to discover extraterrestrials. So fast forward now, we have the Artemis program, and the first people are supposed to land on the south pole of the moon in 2024. That's when the manned mission, and the first woman they're going for. So it seems to me that they've just picked up the original plan for disclosure. I believe that, and I'm completely speculating here. This is complete speculation, but I believe that they're going to go to the moon. They're going to find some artifacts. They're going to find evidence of a civilization there, and they're going to show us. And then an ET race will step in and say, now you found us, we can contact you. And then they can kind of slowly unravel it, because it's so advanced. The lies that they've told have been so advanced that you can't just let one thing. I mean, there's time travel, there's cloning, there's slavery, there's a lot going on. There's trade. Our entire political situation that revolves around the happenings in the space program.
It was always interesting to me, just as a citizen, like, okay, we went to the moon, and then we didn't hear, nothing's happening with the space program for like 40 years or so. Like, you would think that's the beginning, but it was almost like we got there and that was the end of it. And the way the moon revolves around the Earth, circles the Earth, you only see the one side of the moon all the time. Yeah. It doesn't spin. It's like, really? So, nothing's ever been discussed about what's on the other side of the moon.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing is, so they've always touted, I found it was great that they've always touted that it's too expensive. There's no way we can go back to the moon. It's too much manpower. They've even said this as recently, is into the 2000s, 2005 back then there was a conversation and they said, no, it's just not feasible to go to the moon. There's no reason. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, we have a changing of the guard. We have a different president in office. They come out and say, not only can we go to the moon, but we're going to be there in 4 years, or 5 years. We're going to go to the moon and we're going to be permanently manned there with a permanent presence with a space station around the moon, the Gateway. They did all that seemingly overnight, and then they're going to go to Mars.
Right.
So it's not like the technology was the problem. It's more like the permission was the problem. And all of a sudden that's changed recently. And now you're seeing more ETs in the public eye, like you said, in pop culture. There's astronauts, there's ETs on the commercials. Don't lay a hand on my butterfinger, it's an ET.
Right, yeah.
And so, and then, when I was young, when most people said there was no life, they believed there was no life up there, which anybody that believes that just has no idea of the size of the cosmos. Anybody that has their head around the absolute, the numbers involved with the stars up there, anybody that knows can get their head around that big of a number, it's obvious that there's going to be life.
Right.
But anybody that doesn't believe in life up there, I think just is ignorant of the size of nature.
Or they don't want to know, maybe, because I think what's happening today is there's two different types of people. I think there's people who want to know the truth about whatever this topic is, and then there's other people, they don't want to know the truth because they're afraid that the truth might make them look foolish, like I've been fooled my entire life, and they can't handle that. And other people say, I want to know the truth regardless of what it is because it's better to know the truth than not know the truth. So I don't know, that's just my own personal opinion.
Well, it's people, to me, it's people that are doing well within the system don't want to change the system. And people that are not doing well within the system want to look at why they're not doing well and what's going on, something's wrong. And those are the people that are aware. Okay. People that are people that have the illusion of doing better than their fellow man don't want to have anything that was changing. They don't rock the boat, man. I'm winning the game. Right. And so I think that's what's going on.
And I guess also that there's a lot of, and I always wonder about this, where I think the movies are used in many ways to kind of do the little drip, drip, drip in terms of technology and things like that. And then also to create a potential fear in the ETs, where everything I've been subject to by watching Guy and listening to folks like yourself is, there's some good ones like anything else with people. There's good people and there's not so good ones. But it seems like the government might be into, okay, let's put a level of fear out there. So if we do have an issue with ETs, we can tell everybody we have to, protect them. But then when you take that you follow that track of thought, from what I watched on Gaia, it seems like certain civilizations have brought in outsiders to protect them, only to end up being the couriers, if you will, to put them into an enslavement, I put that in quotes, type of future.
Yeah, well, without getting into a lot of details about what I went through, the things that we lived with when I was on the Ceres colony, the realities of that society, the stark differences from the reality of our society are a few things. One is that we're the top of the food chain, that we're the smartest things there are. And the fact is we're not. And there are many, many, many civilizations that are very far advanced above us, higher above us than we are above our pet cat or our pet dog. And not to take anything away, call us stupid, because we're very, our form of consciousness is very, very potent and very intelligent. But there are other beings in the cosmos that are far more intelligent than us, and we've been lied to about that, so that we don't even aspire to be better. That's the key, is that we're not aspiring to be better.
So we have more power. Is this what is that we have more power than we're being led to believe, and that kind of keeps us down?
Well,
we do have less power.
Well, no, just that we think that we're at the top of existence. So people are not trying to become better. Very few people are trying to better themselves. Most people are trying to get ahead financially. And the ones that have gotten ahead, I look around me where I live and I see people that they've got their survival solved, but there's no aspiration to be morally better, mentally smarter, mentally better, There's absolutely zero. And because they think that they have already, that's everything you should do. It's the survival part of it. And if we had an example of higher beings that we could see on TV, that we could interact with, we had that example, I think our quality of life and our general, the quality of our society would go up dramatically and very quickly.
Okay. So this is Guys Radio, your host, Robert Manni, our special guest, Tony Rodrigues. We're talking about the secret space program now, but I want to get into, Tony, it's okay with you. Let's get into like how you were recruited as a kid and what type of kids they look for and how did that all come about? Because you were like an empath. Is that you have empathic ability, and that's who kind of they're after? Is that it, or explain it to us?
Well, I wasn't recruited. I was, I was I wasn't chosen for it because of merit of what I was. I was more of a victim of it. I brushed elbows with some people that had access to the technology. I went to school with a young boy that his father was apparently high up in the program, and had the ability to have people drafted into it.
Okay.
And I didn't get along, and I kind of bullied him. I bullied his son, and he came into my school and was the judge to the science fair one day. Mm-hmm. And this was in the school year of 1981 to 1982. It would have been April of 82. And I was walking through the cafeteria when setting up my science fair exhibit. And this boy pointed me out to his dad, who he had said in the past, my dad's an Illuminati. What's your dad do? And because we just didn't get along, we were just, those kind of kids. And he said, that's the boy I told you about, Dad, that ruined my confidence. That's the one. And then he pointed him out and he said some things that didn't make sense to me. And it was later that night that I was taken, or within a couple days of that day.
Now, when you say taken, what do you mean, Tony? How old were you?
So I was 10 years old.
Okay.
It was fourth grade. And, I woke up with a gray in my face. There were bright lights flashing outside I lived in a farmhouse. Mm-hmm. All by itself. It's not like we were around other houses. We were on a 13-acre big farm, and we were far off the road and everything. And there were bright lights outside of the house flashing. There were noises that was happening, and it all stopped. And I woke up and I had your standard gray alien standing in my face, standing over me. And it like paralyzed me. And a few other beings came in at the foot of my bed and picked me up and carried me to the foot of my bed. And there was a bright flash of light. And I ended up in a laboratory.
Okay, hang on right there. So just for the benefit of some of our listeners who aren't familiar with what a gray is, what is a gray? And is it a living entity, or is it some type of clone type of being that's used by other extraterrestrials? What is a gray? What does it look like? How tall are they, etc.? Because we've all seen the kind of reports on them, that they're the little gray guys with the big black eyes, small bodies. Is that what you're referring to?
Exactly. That's right. Exactly right. So there are several different kinds. I believe the ones that were taking me, and most of the worker ones, were a form of like a robot, or a drone. Mm-hmm. In that case, they would set foot in someone's room and take them. And it's just like how we send drones to other countries. We're not allowed to fly over other countries, but we send drones in because it's a drone. So there's a legal ramification. There's a legal precedent there. So I think it's the same thing with a lot of the smaller grays are basically a drone. And when I got there, so the ones that were in charge were taller and more of a, you call them gray, it's not fair. They were actually white. And they had long necks, and they looked a lot like them, but they were taller.
Now you were 10 years old, and you woke up, and where were you? And how did you feel?
It was a rounded room. I was...
you must have been petrified.
Petrified at first, but not really. What happened was the beginning of... I was petrified at first, but then the beginning of the telepathic communication, where they could speak to you telepathically, when they began that, said, you're going to be okay. We're not going to hurt you. We're here. And at that point, I thought I was in a first contact situation. Mm-hmm. I thought that the next day, it was going to be all over the news that ETs have landed, and we were, that this was the beginning of a new age for us. And so I was just tickled. I was actually happy about it. So I knew you guys were real. I knew there was life up there. I just knew it. And I'm so happy that you guys, have contacted me. I can't wait to tell everybody. And they just went on about their work. They were doing an examination on me.
So after that, what happened?
Well, he said that, so the taller white one told there was a shorter reptilian one in the room. And he was explaining to me that they were going to take me for 20 years. That I was going to live 20 years. And I said, no, I can't do that. I could never be away from my mom and dad and my family for that long. And he explained that I was going to be put back, and it would be the next day, that I was very lucky that this was going to happen to me, and I was going to live for 20 years, and I would get a lot of experiences, and I was going to be a better person, and then I was going to go back, travel time, and I would go back the next day and go home. And he said, he kept saying over and over again, it'll be like you never left. Trust me. And so I thought I was in a first contract situation, and I wanted to help. He said, we need your help. We want you to help us. And I said, okay.
All right. So what happened?
Well, then they laid me back down on a table, and it was a lot like the Fire in the Sky movie. Mm-hmm. In fact, that procedure was exactly like it, where they put me on the table and they put a sheet over me, and it got sucked tight to the table, like the air. Mm-hmm. And then they cut a hole in the sheet so I could breathe, and then they cut out the eye. And a needle came over and went right in my eye, and it felt like I got punched. I saw stars. It went right in my tear duct. Mm-hmm. And I woke up without any memory. My next memory after that was I woke up without any memory of my mom and dad or who I was. I had complete amnesia of who I was. And I woke up in front of a doctor and a nurse getting a medical examination in a bed in California, Southern California, the Inyo Kern Air Base. So from that point, I lived for 20 years. I had no memory of mom and dad, no memory of where I was from or anything. I had complete amnesia. And I lived for 20 years. And what happened was, I was trained for a task, and I would do it for a couple years until I was no good for it anymore, and then trained for another task and switched. And because I wasn't somebody that was groomed like your typical person. Like you hear a lot of the soldiers, people that are taken there, They are groomed from birth, and they're taken into the my labs, and they're soldiers, and they go and serve, and then they might do a couple of jobs, but they're basically a soldier the whole time. They were meant for it. I wasn't. I was just an extra. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, I was traded from program to program. Mm-hmm. And I think it may have led to me being able to remember.
Before we get into what happened during those 20 years, now you're out and you got your memory back, and now you're talking about it. Do you think that's by design, that this is part of disclosure to get folks like you out there to start to talk about these things, or are you getting any pushback to like, hey, Tony, enough, no more, or is it like just putting it out there?
So there's a lot. I mean, we could talk. I mean, I could fill up an entire show just talking about what happened after I came forward. I've had a few visitations. I was taken in. I've been contacted by a few military organizations to be an advisor for ongoing things. There's a lot of things going on. 2 years ago, there was a group that contacted me that wanted me to be an advisor, and they were doing missions. I hesitate to talk about it, but they were doing rescue missions for American citizens that were being sold into slavery. Mm-hmm. And they found that there were extraterrestrials behind it. So, and then I was taken and interrogated by another military group, and remembered that. So I've had a bit of weirdness. So do you have to think about what happened up there and the missions that I was on? So the colony that I ended up getting traded to is a very secretive colony inside the space program. There are hundreds of colonies in our solar system at this point. Mm-hmm. Not all of them work together. So there's a database where there was a job that I went to, and I ended up for a German colony, the Ceres Colony Corporation. And they don't really do business with the United States. They don't really do business with the rest of the colonies. So there's a wall of secrecy there. During missions there, that we were not only trading with ET species throughout the galaxy and in other galaxies, we were stealing from them. There were missions where we stole, where we outright dressed in different clothes and posed as different people, and went down as we were trading, and we loaded, instead of loading up the boxes we bought, we loaded up other things that we weren't supposed to for technology. Mm-hmm. During some of those missions, I believe that my records were deleted in case we were captured
Right.
I believe they deleted my record, so that now the people, well, since I've come forward, now the people in the programs don't have me in their system, so they don't believe that even though a lot of the things I say make sense, they don't have the authority to do anything to me.
Okay.
Because I don't have a record.
Got it.
Up there. My permanent record isn't there.
The area we haven't gotten to yet is this 20-year period. So where'd you go? What were your jobs? And what was your living conditions like? Did you have recreation time? Did you get to have sex? Did you party? What was it like?
Well, 20 years, there's a lot that can happen. There were a lot of different circumstances. The first 6 years or so, I was on Earth.
Okay.
Where? I was in Seattle, and what they did was after the MK Ultra program, like I said, I went in through a mind control program in Inyokern. What they did was they were drugging us. They would give us an IV bag, and we would lose consciousness. And when I woke up, people were blown away by the things I said. So that it was a military. It was a near-death experience. They would bring you near to death, and then apparently they could speak with other entities and get information from the past and the future. Mm-hmm. And this was a military grade psychic that they had. And they were kids, and there were about a dozen kids that went through the class that I did. And what I ended up doing was going to Seattle, and he did that. I witnessed of him, it was in his private residence. I witnessed him do a few very hardcore, very bad satanic ritual things. And then I was shipped off to Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru. And what was happening there was that they were manufacturing cocaine in the jungles, and it was coming up by boat to the town. And after every month or so, it would accumulate in a warehouse, and every month they would have a plane load of it, and then they would fly it from there to Santa Marta, Colombia. One of the planes went down, and so they had paid to have me on board. And so I had a cabin, and I just sat there. I was badly damaged mentally after going through that trauma-based mind control. And we would get on a plane. It was a C-46 Commando. I had a handler, a young man in his 20s. He was the only one that could speak English in the village. And he would put me on a cot in the plane next to a pile of cocaine kilos. And after we got up over the state of Acre, he put the IV in my arm, and I would lose consciousness. And I was a warning system if the police were going to be involved or the bad weather. Apparently, they lost a plane in bad weather. So it was I was a security precaution for those shipments. And I did that for about 2 years down there. When I got to about the age of 13, right around puberty, I lost the ability. It went away. He said when I woke up that he talked to his dead grandmother. He said that there were times that I talked in fluent Spanish, and I do not know Spanish. He said that after a while, the people in the village, where he had a piece of paper with questions from everybody from the village that he was asking me while I was under, because for the rest of most of the flights were, they didn't need me there. But he said that while I was under, many different people spoke through me. Many different people were speaking through me, and he was getting information. And he said they were blown away that everybody got out of my way when I walked through the village after a few months of it. I was there for a couple years, and what happened was they were giving us a cocktail of drugs every morning. We do calisthenics every morning, and they give us a bunch of pills to take, and they had changed it, and I was allergic to one of the pills, and after a couple of days of it, I was just very ill. I would throw up, and I couldn't do it, and they said that you're either going to take these pills or you're going to be sold to the military. And about 2 weeks after that, she took me and dropped me off behind a shopping center, and two guys in a van gave me an injection. I lost consciousness, and I woke up on a craft on the way to the back of the moon.
How did you know? I'm sorry to interrupt. You were on the way to the back of the moon. How did you know where you were going, or where you ended up?
Well, it was like being on an airplane, and there was an officer next to me, and they told me that. And then when you got close to the moon, the side of the craft, the wall would turn transparent, and you could see it.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to get to the moon? Was it
I woke up
super fast, or?
It wasn't long. I woke up en route, mm-hmm. and probably only 30 minutes before we were landing. So on that trip, there was another trip earlier prior to Seattle when I went to the moon as well for a surgery, and that trip was an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay. All right, so you get there. What happens?
I got there, and then they handed me over to, again, there were military men and the tall whites, and I was taken into a classroom situation, and what they did was they gave us drugs, and they would put us in front of a monitor, and you got kind of locked in, and you had to watch it, and it was all fight or flight response. It was like programming, so that in the event of an emergency, I would not take flight, that I would stop and fight. And that was the extent of my military programming. That was my military training.
Wow.
It was fight or flight. And it was so that in the event of danger, that I would, rather than run away and try to save myself, that I would try to sacrifice myself for the other soldiers, or they said brothers, for your brothers. That was what the movies always said, sacrifice yourself for your brothers. We were taken from there and tested. We went to another base on the back of the moon on a small ship, and we were taken into a big arena, and we were given small canisters that were like a grenade, but we were told that after we walked in the arena, they would arm, and as soon as we hit the detonator button, and they would immediately go off, not a grenade. And if we had, how did he put it to us? He said, and if you see something that's going to do harm to you, you might consider doing the right thing and blowing it up and saving your brothers, or saving, other people.
Got it.
We went in there, and they closed the door behind us, and on the other end was a giant insect, like a spider, but a very big one, like a 400-pound insect, came on the other side, and it began to approach us. There was a crowd. It was like an arena. I couldn't see the crowd. There were lights up above us, but you could hear them yelling, and it approached us. And one of the kids, there were about a dozen of us kids that were in there, in this program, and one of them ran up to it and detonated that thing and blew its head off and blew himself in half. And I was told that he lived. And everybody crowd cheered, and then people in medical coats came in and went straight to him, and then they took us out and they gave us a medical examination in a hospital area, and we slept in our beds like a hospital bed that night. And the following day, we were taken to Mars. We were loaded up on a much larger ship. It got from the moon to Mars very quickly, but it didn't have access to land. We stayed in orbit for 2 or 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, before we had clearance to land. And as soon as I landed, I was taken from that ship to a smaller one and flown to a forward base that was an underground base that had 5 or 6 levels. And it was a base meant for a few hundred people, and there were only about 50 people there. Apparently, it had been overrun in some conflict prior to that, and was a forward base, and so people didn't live there. And they set us up in office cubicles with cots. Myself and the rest of the guys from my program that came along, and we were basically a support soldier. We were like bait. It's called a bounding maneuver. So we had white environmental suits that we would go out and hike, and there would be 2 soldiers that had full body armor and camouflage. Like they had a full armor suit, and in the gravity of Mars, the suits weighed them down enough to where they could walk around and run and jump as if they were on Earth. They were negatively buoyant. Okay. But we were not. We had to struggle. So we couldn't really run very fast in the gravity because our suits were just environmental suits. They were very light. I did 3 missions, hiking missions basically, and on the 3rd one we were engaged by giant insects. I have some artwork that I worked with people and made. But they're indigenous insects to Mars, and we were engaged, and there were casualties. I had an arm taken off. A lot of people that never heard of any of this stuff before have a hard time believing that. But I did have an arm taken off. We had auto tourniquets. The soldiers had auto tourniquets inside their armor. So if they lost an arm, the armor would tourniquet immediately. But we had auto tourniquets. It was about the size of a pack of cigarettes with a cord on it, and you would grab it and kind of pull it. And then you could put it around your limb and press a button, and it would tourniquet. That happened, and I lost an ankle, my foot under the ankle. So I had to crawl over to another person and take his auto tourniquet and put it on, and the soldiers marched me back. Apparently, for whatever strategy, whatever that program was trying to achieve, they were trying to make numbers. They were trying to use soldiers that There were people like me that were just taken, that were not meant to be a soldier, people that were slaves, perhaps people out of prison. They were trying to put numbers on the ground, boots on the ground, rather than a soldier that was, expensive and made for it to try to match the bugs.
Okay. All right. Let me interrupt you there. So how did you get your arm back? They have technology which would regrow the limb?
That's funny. Everybody asked that. So they had canceled the program, but what happened was the Sioux soldiers found me, and the suits had things. They had things that would inject you, and when you did, you felt great. I lost a lot of blood, and he carried me back, and it was a few kilometers back to the base, which was basically just a door in the side of a mountain. And he carried me back, and he kept slapping me. He wouldn't let me go to sleep. And I kept wanting to pass out. He said, look, if you keep it up, you're going to see the purple sunset. You always wanted to see a purple sunset. It's almost time. And I kind of did. It was a bad weather day, but I kept passing out, wanting to go to sleep, and he wouldn't let me. He kept injecting me. He had his own, in his suit, he had those things too, as a stimulant. And he would inject me with them, and I would last for a while, but it was very painful. But as soon as I laid eyes on the door to get back in the base, he let me pass out, and I went to sleep. And when I woke back up, I was in a hospital bed with my arm and my leg back. So how it happened, the process of how it happened, I don't know.
Let me ask you this. So you go, they're using you kind of as cannon fodder. You go out there, they bring you to Mars, they throw you out there with some other guys, and you engage these insectoids, and you have to kind of deal with them. Why don't they, and if they're the enemy, why can't they just use like nuke them or whatever, lasers or something, just take them out instead of having like this hand-to-hand combat?
That's a great question. And honestly, the macro political stuff, I don't have any real insight into, to be honest with you. I believe that Mars isn't completely owned by us. And I believe that the insects were a worthy opponent, something that they couldn't nuke because they had the ability to defend themselves. I believe that they were a worthy opponent. They couldn't do that, and they were territorial. So the only time that they really needed to engage the insects was to invade their territory. Other than that, they left each other alone. The insects had a different kind of mentality altogether from what we think about in normal war.
Okay.
It was all territorial. But I don't think that they had the ability to exterminate them all.
Okay. All right, we're running out of time here, and I think if it's okay with you, Tony, I'd like to make this kind of part one, because I think we've only scratched the surface, and it's a great conversation, and I hope you're comfortable and we can continue it. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so last question for this episode on Guys Radio, and that would be after going through this, because we're going to get into the rest of your time in the program, and then you came back, and now you've rekindled your memories, and you're out there talking. How do you feel about what's happened to you? Would you, if by choice, I was going to ask you, would you do it again? It sounds like probably the answer is no, but how do you feel about all of this?
Well, okay, so nowadays I look at how it's affected my life. So when I came back, even though they erase your memory, they blank slate you and they put you back, I was not the same person. That following day, I was a completely different person. I was a 10-year-old kid, and I had no idea what the hell just happened to me. I was lost. I felt like I hadn't seen my mom and dad in 20 years. I went to school.
Are you in touch with your parents now, or was that all gone? Or how did that, you came back?
We don't talk about it. I don't.
And they were 20 years, everybody else is 20 years older. How do you?
No. I went back to a few minutes after I was taken originally. My parents had no idea. In the middle of the night I was taken. The next morning I got up and it was over.
So the 20 happened. So the 20 happened and everything goes back.
Yes, they put you back in time.
Okay.
And I believe there's a cloning technology. I believe that it's a clone. I believe they clone you, and the clone goes and lives the 20 years. They put it back in time, and they put your consciousness back in your original body, and that's why the memories, the clone has the memories of the 20 years, and because I got my memories back of my life, and I lost the memories of the 20 years.
Are you a spiritual person based on this experience, or were you and you're not now, or were you and you are even more so now? Or how do you feel about this whole thing?
Absolutely. I think that our religions are woefully inadequate for what the reality of our spirituality requires. The closest thing I found that resonated with me was the Chan Buddha, that they allowed for life throughout the universe.
Okay.
And just the way the soul, I believe in reincarnation. I believe the soul is a real thing. And I believe that's what happened. I believe they took my soul out of one body, put it in a clone body, and then used it, and then my body, and then put my soul back, and then put me back a few minutes later. I think there's a time travel component, which time travel happens quite a bit up there.
Okay. All right. It's Guys Radio, amazing show with Tony Rodrigues of the Secret Space Program. We got to take a pause now because time's up, but we're going to do it again. And I want to thank Tony for being here and being a wonderful guest and really a good guy about this whole thing. And thank you for putting up with my questions. But I do my best to ask what I would ask if I was driving down the highway and say, ask him this. That's what I want to be the advocate for our listeners, because not many people know about this. So I really want to get the questions out there and also get your real feelings on this. So thank you so much, Tony. I'm not going to ask, where people can get in touch with you, because I don't know if you want people to get in touch with you, but let's leave it there and we'll pick it up next time. So thank you so much, Tony, for being with me on Guys Radio. Tony Rodrigues of the Secret Space Program. All right, Guys Radio, Robert Manni, your host here. Wow, what a compelling interview, discussion with Tony Rodrigues about the Secret Space Program, and that's only part one. We've got another episode coming up either next week or the following week. That's going to be the big part two, and we're going to continue Tony's experience in his 20 and back in the Secret Space Program. So what did we learn so far? Well, we learned that Tony didn't volunteer for his duty, if you will. It wasn't very pleasant. The training some of it was very traumatic and horrible, and it wasn't as glamorous as you might think it was. But he did go off planet. He went to the moon. He went to Mars. He went to Ceres, and he saw a lot of things that most of us won't see in this lifetime, but we're going to learn about it. And as Tony stated, there is a disclosure, a drip, drip, drip going on where we're learning each day more and more. And if you talk to people, they're not freaked out about extraterrestrials being amongst us here on Earth or also living in other places. People are waking up to the fact that, hey, maybe we're narcissistic to think that we are the only beings in this entire universe. Because if you think about it, your mind can't handle thinking about how far is out there. And how far does it go? And what's after that? And what's after that? And what's after that? We just can't comprehend it. So there's got to be a lot more stuff going on that we're aware of. And I was just reading another article that said the human eye, we only pick up 1% of what's going on out there in front of us. Can you imagine that? That 99% of things that we could potentially see, we don't see. So it's really wild. Anyhow, Guys Radio, your host, Robert Manni. The show is on every Wednesday evening here on KCAA, 102.3, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM every Wednesday evening. We post the show then on Thursday morning all over the internet. And we're just getting started. We've got a lot of great guests coming up. We've interviewed a lot of great guests recently. We just had John Gray on of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. We had Neil Donald Walsh on of Conversations with God. We had Tom Hartman of the Tom Hartman Program, the progressive radio host who has a huge following. And I've got some special surprises coming up over the next month or so that you're really going to like, including we've got a commitment from Dan Millman, who wrote The Life of the Peaceful Warrior, and he's one of my personal inspirations. So he's agreed to be on the show. So I'm going to hold myself to that by putting it out on air. So that's going to be fantastic. And we've got a lot more stuff going on. So if you want to support the show and you want to support what I'm doing, you can check out my novel on Amazon or wherever they sell books, The Guy's Guide to Love. It's a lot of fun. It's been called The Male Sex in the City. You can also, when you catch us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, you can rate us, you can review, you can subscribe. I'm all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, my website, robertmanni.com. I want to thank you for being my listeners. I love working with you guys. I love bringing information out there that people can dissect and determine if it's something that can help them, because really what I want to do is be a conduit to being able to help people and raise the consciousness of the planet by bringing information that people can use to raise their frequency, uplift their life, do the best they possibly can. And again, it's up to you. I'll bring the information out there. You can say, okay, I'll use this. I'm not that interested in that. That's fine. I want to help guys, because a lot of guys are stuck these days, and the guys have trouble dealing with change sometimes. I think we all know that. And also, women are very open. So the show, believe it or not, the audience is split pretty much down the middle between men and women. We've got a ton more shows coming up here on KCAA and all over the internet. And I want to thank you for coming along for the ride on Guys Radio. So we'll see you next week. And as I always like to say, guys, finish first.